Right. Right. Walden. Vanakkam again. The idea of a right to health is quite divisive in public health discourse. Every part of the political spectrum seems to have a strong opinion about it. Voices on the capitalist camp are strongly opposed to any talk of rights. Liberals tolerate the discourse to an extent, and voices on the left see it as a foundation for achieving health for all. Most of the discourse gets lost in language. What does the right to health mean? What all does it encompass, and why should it be a fundamental right? In this video, we tried to build a foundation around the framings of the right to health. Before we talk about the right to health, it's important that we define it. Most of the debates around the right to health are in fact debates about just the right to health care. The difference between them is important. The right to health care is just what it seems, that every human being should have medical care that is accessible, acceptable, and of a high quality. This healthcare should be provided equally, irrespective of race, caste, gender, and class. This implies that even somebody without any money should have this care, either through free provision of care or through the government paying. Most governments claiming to hold health as a right usually limit themselves to this one aspect. International organizations and the human rights movement take the right to health one step further. The journey for human rights has a long history and associated struggles, and I'm not an expert on them, so I shall stick to how they are interpreted at the present. The current global understanding of human rights is based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, signed in 1948. The principle here being that the dignity and equal rights of all humans is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. The specific right to health is mentioned in Article 25 of the Declaration. It adds to the right to healthcare by bringing in well-being, including rights to food, clothing, housing, and social security. This right is further codified in several international covenants signed after that. The Constitution of the World Health Organization as well as the Declaration of Alma-Ata also take these rights as a foundation. They also added things like access to safe water and sanitation to the right to health. There are a bunch of other rights present in the covenants that should ideally be considered under the umbrella of the right to health. For example, the rights to have favorable conditions at work, the right to get leave for leisure and rest, the right to have clean air to breathe that isn't polluted by industries run for profit, etc. Right, again. Now let's move on to framing. I firmly believe that health is a human right and not providing the means to create this health is a crime. I'll explain why I feel so, starting with the right to healthcare. Critics of the right to healthcare say that healthcare is a service and like any other service, it needs to be paid for by the patient. Check out the comments on any video discussing free healthcare on this platform to find ardent market worshippers saying exactly this. They don't seem to mind that we don't personally pay for other rights that suits the narratives of neoliberalism. For example, the right to private property is enforced strongly by the state and their porcine foot soldiers. The rights around nationhood and sovereignty are used extensively to fund the military-industrial complex. My point is that spending people's money on the military and police forces isn't considered a waste, but somehow providing them with health or education should be left to the market. There is also the breaking of the social contract. We put up with all the bylaws that the states enforce, and the least we should expect from the state is to provide the things that are essential for human survival, and that includes healthcare. Governments tend to see the human experience as a binary, either dead or alive. They really should consider the infinite number of states between to ensure that people are the best they can be. The framing by the international organizations too leaves a lot to be desired. Both the United Nations and the World Health Organization see the provision of basic human rights as a foundation for peace and prosperity in the world. I strongly believe that we should have higher aspirations. I find the socialist way of framing rights, borrowed from Marx, lays a better foundation. It sees rights as essential for the liberation of humanity, the basic tools and assurances that all humans need to have in order to prosper as a species and live in harmony with the rest of the planet. While the international framing of rights boils down to the individual, rights assured at a personal level to each human, the socialist approach looks at the rights at the level of the collective. Approaching this from a materialist perspective, these rights reflect their times and power structures of when they were formed. At their core, individual rights place life, liberty, and private property at the forefront, while social and economic rights are pushed to the back. This is reflected in the way the fight for the right to health is always halted when it comes up against the profits of the health industry. If we were to take the collective approach, the core rights for the liberation of humanity, health being one of them, would always be placed above. People above profits. The fight for the right to health has been a long one and is still nowhere close to being won. While I do intend to make another video highlighting some of these struggles, I want to point out here why the framing of the issue matters. Anything that tries to bring about a dent in private profits for the greater good of humanity will be subject to opposition from the ruling classes. Take the North Indian state of Rajasthan for example. A couple of years ago, civil society organization thought they finally had a victory when the state government passed a bill giving the people a right to healthcare. It ensured that all people in the state had access to medical care without having to pay upfront. The industry came down hard on them, with doctors taking to the streets to oppose the bill. They framed it in the same neoliberal way, where they misunderstood this as something that would cut into their profits. With the economic, social, and political capital that they had, the doctors confirmed to all that they will only act in their own class interests. The government was forced to water down an already basic bill. The framing on international declarations is also not without its problems. International laws are suggestions at best, and more often than not an excuse for imperialist powers to justify hostile geopolitical actions while turning a blind eye on their own abuses. Nothing illustrates this better than the ongoing genocide in Gaza. For 2.5 years, the upholders of international law have aided and abetted a settler colony committing the most horrifying human rights violations while arguing about the semantics of it. Whether you're the largest economy or the biggest democracy, states still barely respect the basic fundamental rights of their own people. While these treaties do give us a framework to start the discourse on rights, I think it is unlikely that we will ever come to realize a full right to health within it. In my opinion, the socialist framework is the most suited for this struggle. Grassroots movements across the globe, with an organized base demanding this right, have always used this approach as their foundation. From the Chiapas to Rojava, large people's movements have managed to gain this right while rooting it to a larger struggle for the complete emancipation of all of humanity. Movements and organizations across the world have been fighting for the right to health, with mixed results. A shout out to the People's Health Movement, who've been pushing for this right and broadening its definition for 2.5 decades. The path to realizing this right for all of humanity is long, and we are up against the forces of capital. If we are to transform to a better world, we need all our rights to be centered around the liberation of all of humanity. Nandri.